Oh, and Daniel please. Mr. Rob?
Oh, I thought that was quick, Daniel. This is Bob LeMent, and welcome to Movie 101.
Yes, Movie 101 is created to empower movies itself. Again, another episode, another week, and happy winter.
Yeah, happy winter, exactly. It's
Yes,
winter now.
winter now. So happy winter to everyone, especially if
Yeah.
you're having snow, like Mr. Bob.
I hope you don't have too much snow. Exactly.
Yes, we're
But
lucky this year.
our movie tonight, it didn't matter if there was
Oh
snow or no
yes,
snow. It didn't matter.
yeah. Yes.
There was
So
no
our
snow, but
what will be your what is your religion, Mr. Bob? Because it
so
relates to our movie for today.
so we're talking about Conclave today, and they were sequestered, and so they didn't get to go outside, so they didn't know if it was snowing or not.
Oh yes, here we go. This is our poster.
Yeah, so Ray
Conclave.
Fiennes is the lead character who plays Lawrence um, in Conclave. And Conclave is what happens when the Pope dies. All the cardinals go to Rome, to the Vatican, right? And then Vatican City, and they get sequestered to make the decision on who is the next Pope.
Next.
So, yeah, that's what it's all about. Is
Mm.
that interesting or no?
Interesting. So give us the main plot of Conclave. Very fast. Oh my god. Without the spoilers. But I love spoilers, people.
Well, you're going to get spoilers this time.
Oh yes, thank you.
The so yeah, so if you're listening to this, I hope you've watched the movie already because we're going to talk about some stuff here. So
Yes. This is a
the
new movie, right?
so
Mhm.
basically, I mean, it's a quite, and I think I mentioned this on one of our other reviews. It's a very linear story. So we start at the beginning and we go to the end, and there's not any flashbacks or other side stories or anything. It's all one main story played from the beginning to the end. And so we start out with the death of the Pope,
Yes.
and the Pope is been ill. The Pope is dying, and so some of his confidants come in to see him before he passes, and one of those is Ray Fiennes, another one is Stanley Tucci as Bellini, and a few other folks come in to see the Pope before he dies. They're all very sad, but you know the funny thing is that at least in the Catholic Church, and I'm sure in most churches, it doesn't really matter what church it is.
Mhm.
There's a lot of politics, and so as soon as everybody's like, "Oh, poor Pope, he's dying," and then boom, as soon as he's dead, it's all backstabbing and
Yes.
positioning, and people trying to be the next Pope. And it was really quite interesting because they did play it out linearly. So Ray finds himself as the person who is in charge of the conclave, and so he's the one that has to organize everyone and get them all there, and make sure that this election for the new pope runs as it's supposed to. But alas, things go awry, as you would say, because of all this kind of political maneuvering. And so his friend Stanley Tucci Bellini says, "Oh, I really don't want to be pope." But as the story unfolds, you find out he really wants to be pope. He puts on a
Oh,
show. And so
wow.
the interesting thing about this movie is it all plays out in real time, and nobody is what they seem to be. And I think that's the point of the movie. If you really get down to the nitty gritty of what it's about, it is about how nothing is what it seems to be. So Ray finds he says he doesn't want to be pope, but then certain people say, "Well, you should be the pope," and he's like, "I really don't want to be the pope." And he tried to actually, it comes out in a linear fashion that he had talked to the Pope because he's having conversations with some of the other cardinals, and he tried to quit. And the Pope said, "No, no, you can't quit because you're needed in this position." And he's like, you could put anybody in this position, And he was feeling kind of down and so forth. And it's also about how all these people who you would think are, extremely religious, constantly have bouts uh, of not feeling that there is a God. Now,
Oh, wow.
what cardinal do you want that says I don't think that there's a God?
Oh my gosh.
So they have a lot of lapses in faith, and so it's not. It's not like it's not like a tense kind of thriller kind of movie. It's more of a drama, akin to like a stage play. But they do a really good job in presenting it, and they also do a really good job in their locations because I'm sure I didn't read up on this, but I'm pretty sure that they did not get to film in the Vatican. I
For
don't think the
sure.
Vatican, given the storyline about how it kind of exposes that the some of the cardinals are, kind of just doing it for show, and not really totally, committed to the church. I'm sure they did not get permission to be in the Vatican, but the settings that they were in were beautiful, beautiful old, very old world buildings, and the settings were quite interesting just in and of themselves. So now we have Ray Fiennes' character Lawrence. He's got to navigate all these different people who are vying to be the next pope, and one of them happens to be his good friend Bellini. He doesn't know that at the beginning. He finds that out. John Lithgow plays Tremblay, and he wants to be pope, but he finds out at like the 11th hour, just before the pope died, he basically dismissed Tremblay. He's like, you're out of the church. But because it was so last minute, it, they didn't really get all the paperwork in, and so it's only hearsay. And so Tremblay is still in because no one's actually, put in the necessary paperwork and the bureaucracy of the church to actually kick him out. And so now Lawrence is stuck with wondering, what do I do? Because people are telling me that he got dismissed, but I don't have any proof, because the Catholic Church is really a giant bureaucracy, and so the wheels of the bureaucracy have to turn, and if there's not everything's not in place, then it's not for real. And so we have Tremblay, we have Bellini, and then we have Tedesco. Tedesco is another cardinal, and he's a very, very old school Italian cardinal, and he wants to roll all the rules back to where they only speak Latin, and take everything back, half a century to where the Catholic Church is much more tolerant now than it was back then. He wants to be very conservative and roll back any tolerances towards any special groups or anything way back, don't have any women involved in anything in the church, and definitely nothing with homosexuals or gay rights, and nothing like that. So they're like, and he's a fairly popular cardinal, so everybody's worried, is Tedesco going to get become the pope? Is Bellini going to get become the pope? And then they have kind of a front runner at the beginning, Adeyemi, who is an African American, or actually he's an African. He's not even American. He's an African cardinal, and he is the favorite, another one of the favorites. And so it looks like he might be pope. And so it's really kind of a horse race throughout this whole movie. But at various points, each one of these people get picked off via kind of political back dealings, And so Adeyemi had a bit of a, what do you want to say, a dalliance when he was younger.
Mm.
And somebody brought the woman that he broke his vows for 30 years ago, and she is now a nun, and they brought her into the environment, and it all came out. And so then he got kicked out of the running for being the pope because obviously he can't control himself.
Cannot
So like a
control.
big deal in the Catholic Church, a bit, I suppose. And so, but it's really interesting because it's all this kind of politics that's happening in the background, while where you think all these people are chaste and good and would not behave like this, they're all just like terrible people. And they're the cardinals. They're supposed to
Yes.
be the people who you look up to and emulate, right? And
Yes.
they're all doing these terrible things. And eventually, Tremblay gets knocked out of the running because papers become available that were hidden, that talk about how he done some, I think embezzlement was his thing. And so then that's why he was going to get kicked out of the church. And so then he falls off. And so then it comes down to Tedesco, Lawrence, and Bellini for a while about who is in the front runner. Because the funny thing is, to me, I thought this was kind of weird because they do more than one vote. So they all come together. They have this very ritualized voting process, which was quite fascinating to watch. Because the initial vote, they showed kind of more of the process, and then as the movie went on and the votes went on, they trimmed it down. Um, but the ritualized voting process was quite fascinating to watch. And then each time, different, with the different scandals that would arise during this conclave, they would get more popular or less popular. And so as it went along, it changed. But to me, I watched this with my wife, and I said, this is my naivete, but I said, don't you think that if all these people are that connected to God, there'd be one vote? There wouldn't need to be more than one vote because God would tell them who to vote for.
Yes. Definitely. For
But I
sure.
think that's the point of the movie, is that that's not what happens. And being human, even if you are a cardinal and a high level person in the church, is still being human,
Yes.
and with all the foibles and all of the negatives that come with it. And that's kind of the point of the movie, is that these people are no better than anybody else out in the world. In
Well,
fact, they
Miss.
may be even worse.
Yes, for sure. But Mr. Bob, let's congratulate the movie itself because it won the Golden Globe Award for Best
That's true.
Screenplay. Let's give a big, big hand.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well, but it
Wow.
it really was quite. I mean, and I haven't even gotten into half of what kind of goes on. You have to
Hmm.
watch the movie, but I
Yes.
mean, there's twists and turns. I don't know if I can. I won't
Yes,
tell you
go
the
ahead.
big twist at the end. You think?
I think yes.
Okay,
You
you want
can
me
go.
to? All right. So, well, before we get to that, so as they go along, they're kind of neck and neck and like a horse race, and Ray finds Lawrence is like, I don't want to be Pope, and then Bellini finally admits that he wants to be Pope, and you can't let Tedesco be the Pope because he's a jerk, and you know,
Yes.
and it gets a little bit aggressive in there. But then there's this one cardinal. His name is Benitez, and he is a Hispanic uh, cardinal. And the thing about him, though, is he was brought in at the very last minute by the previous pope before he died. He signed all the paperwork to make Benitez a cardinal, even though it wasn't like the proper, manner to become a cardinal. He's like, out of nowhere, the pope says, "Guess what, Benitez, you're a cardinal." It's all on the up and up as far as the rules go, but it's very outside the norm. And so Benitez is in the conclave, and he starts getting support from people because uh, we don't even know why. Because at first there was, the funny thing was the very first vote.
Yes.
They read off who was getting the votes, and there was one vote for Benitez, and I think, and then you're given the impression that Lawrence assumes that Benitez voted for himself, and but he talks to Benitez, and he goes, you don't have to tell me, because he's the leader of the conclave, so he has a little bit of a power over everyone. You don't have to tell me, but who did you vote for? And he goes, I voted for you. So then somebody unknown voted for Benitez. And then Benitez started getting support with all these other people showing their, you know, true colors. And eventually it comes down to Tedesco and Benitez, and they're like in a pseudo private meeting with some other cardinals, kind of hashing things out. And he makes a really a brilliant speech after Tedesco is makes his play for everybody's vote, and then Benitez wins. Total unknown, the dark horse, as it were, if we're going to use our horse racing analogies.
The
Out
dark
of
horse.
nowhere, Cinderella story comes in, and he becomes the Pope. And of course, it is a banner thing because he would have been, I think, the first Hispanic Pope. But there's even more. That's not even the spoiler, Daniel.
Not the spoiler itself.
There's
Yes, so
all
go
these
ahead for
juicy
the
bits.
spoiler.
There's so many juicy bits that I'm not telling because I'm not remembering all of them at this moment. But there's a lot of juicy bits through this whole thing. So even if I tell you all this, you should still watch the movie because it's a really well made movie. And the story is very interesting.
and
So
and they said it's AFI movie of the year.
yeah,
Oh
yeah, and I
wow.
think that it's very deserved of all the accolades because it's not a flashy movie. It's not like an action movie or even a thriller. Really, it's
Yes.
it's a process movie and a political movie, and it shows you it it lays bare the foibles of being human, even if you are thought of as being a very pious person,
Mm,
which means we're none of us are pious.
yes.
And so at the very end, so there was a weird thing that gets discovered in all this kind of background digging on Benitez, that he was scheduled to go to Switzerland to go to a clinic, um, and it was a very particular clinic in
Particular clinic.
Switzerland to do a procedure.
Wow.
And so you're like, what could it be? What could it be?
What's question mark? Question mark. What will be the procedure?
and so and so at the very end of the movie, Lawrence, so Benitez has been elected Pope, and it's I don't know if you're familiar with the process. So every time they do a vote for the Pope,
Chimney, I think.
the
Go
chimney,
to the chimney.
exactly. So
Yes.
they had
Yeah.
that, and I love that because they showed you a little bit of the background in that, with the sense that the idea is it's supposedly the burning of the ballots, which they do burn the ballots,
Yes.
so that nobody knows who anybody else voted for. But they actually have smoke canisters to put out the gray smoke or the dark smoke, right? It's
Yes.
not even the real burning. It's just a smoke canister that they load up into a special machine and spray it out through the chimney. It's all show, right?
Oh my God.
Which is
Yes.
fun. It's also a kind of a fun thing in the background there. So they've got the gray smoke. Benitez is getting ready to go greet the people, right?
Mm,
And he has
yes.
to pick his pope name and everything. And Lawrence says, "Well, this whole clinic thing, he's got to know because Lawrence is a very inquisitive character and kind of brings out a lot of these things that are happening with these other cardinals." So he goes and sits down by himself, and it ends with just the two of them together. Um, and he's talking to Lawrence. He's like, you were the Pope, the previous Pope had paid for his ticket to get to this clinic and was paying for everything, I guess,
Oh wow.
which is also very odd, right?
Yes.
And so he sits down and he's like, I need to know what was happening. Why were you going there? And so
Yes.
then they have this
Question mark.
really heartfelt discussion. He goes, I didn't go, and I was going to go, right? Because, and it turns out, this is the big twist. Are you ready? If you're not
Uh,
want to hear
oh,
this, then close
drum
your
roll. Wait,
ears.
drum roll. The twist,
so,
please.
so he has both sex organs. He is a hermaphrodite. He's got a penis and a vagina.
Oh wow.
And so he was going to uh,
Remove.
remove one of them. And they don't tell us which, but
Which
he was
one? Why
going to
not?
go get surgery so that he would be. And they never discuss. They never say which one. But he says, I decided that God made me this way, and I will stay this way. And so then
Oh,
the new pope is not only is he a man, he's a woman at the same time.
half, half.
Isn't that wild?
Very wild. Is this a fictional or
Yes, it's
for
fictional.
sure, right? Fictional.
I don't think the funny thing is I can only imagine that if this scenario has never come up during these conclaves and everything, from this point forward, that's going to be on the form for everyone to disclose. Because it was funny because he goes, and they talk a little bit in riddles during this conversation. It's a very light conversation. They don't come out and say things, straightforward. But he says, being a priest is a very private life. And so
Yes.
no one really knew because it's not like he's naked in front of everybody all the time, So
Mm,
it was his secret, and apparently he divulged it to the Pope, who was going to help him or her. He lived his life as a man, but
mm,
um, help him. And uh, he decided against it, and the Pope was fine. He's like, whatever you think is best. And then he died, obviously, and this all transpired. But it was given the the storyline with Tedesco being this very um, conservative cardinal who didn't really like women being involved in anything, and there's a whole a slight subplot with the nuns who, because the nuns take care of the cardinals while they're in conclave, so they cook all the food and they basically do house chores and everything, and so they're all around but hidden. They're not supposed to be out in the open, and there is a role for them that they play during conclave that is of service to the cardinals, as opposed to being in charge. Although Isabella Rossellini plays Sister Agnes, and she's very much in charge. She's in charge of all of the nuns, and she makes sure things happen. And she actually becomes instrumental at certain points for Cardinal Ademai, his indiscretions being divulged and so forth. And so it really is an interesting look at this life of being, in the Catholic Church on this high level, right? The cardinals
yes.
are the highest level besides the Pope, and so they are kind of like Congress, if you will, because there's so many of them, and they make decisions and so forth. And so it's um, interesting to see their flaws in how political that all this gets with the Cardinals in the background there. But it's worth every accolade. Hopefully, it gets seen some more. I watched it on Peacock. It's on Peacock right now. If you
Oh
have that
wow.
service, you can watch it there. And it's not. What do you want to say? If I were to when I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, do I want to watch this? Do I not want to watch this? It wasn't like something that jumped out at me.
You have a second thought.
But yeah, exactly. I had a moment of a crisis in my faith, and but having watched it, I'm like, wow, it was really quite a well-made, and they kept the story moving. All of the people who acted in it were fantastic, and it's almost like a soap opera in a way, but there's nobody, there's no lovers or anything. It's just all these kind of weird, you know, it's like the Real Housewives of the Vatican or something. All the stuff going on that you wouldn't know about, it gets divulged in the weirdest ways. So, but better than the Real Housewives TV shows. But you know what I'm saying. It's just kind of an interesting. It's not the normal movie that you would would see on an average day. So, and Ray Fiennes apparently had a lot to do with having this movie made. So, kudos to him for finding the material. It was a book before uh, for your book 101 folks.
Yes.
It was a book by I don't remember who it was by though, unfortunately, but it was very very interesting movie and well worth the effort to watch.
Effort to watch. Yes, let's give them a big, big hand again. And hoping for more accolades. Do you think Oscar will give them Best
Uh,
Picture?
well, I don't know if it'll be a best picture, but I certainly think that they should get some awards. I mean, it's tough. Best pictures, it's always a combination of something that is very artful and then somewhat well liked. And I'd say this one could be there, but it'll probably get nominated. I don't know that it would win, but because it is so particular, it's not like people like to talk about church that much. So,
Yes.
you know,
So, do you think, Mr. Bob, what is missing in the conclave?
what is missing?
Yes, if you're the director and you
Right.
want to add something more.
Oh my, I don't know. I don't having watched it, I don't there's nothing that strikes me as being, you know, the funny thing to me was as I was watching it is I thought it was going to go in so many other directions than where it went, which is fantastic because I hate it's not as much fun to watch a movie whenever you know what's going to happen. And you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I told you some of the things that happen, but you're not going to know what happens if you were watching it cold. And it doesn't go in the patterns that I figured. First thing I figured was John Lithgow's Tremblay was going to be some type of pedophile. Nothing
Yes.
about pedophilia, which is a big topic in the Catholic Church, with people, and nothing about that. Nobody was anything like that,
About
which I thought it would
gayness,
go
no.
there. Right. And if there are going to be any homosexual theme, nothing about that really, other than, we had Cardinal Benitez being a hermaphrodite, which is not really gay, but it's certainly not on the radar for what you'd think about in the church. Um, but no, it didn't go into the usual places. And so I can't really think of what would be missing.
Yeah.
I think they handled it really well because everybody, even though they were mean and vicious to each other, they still were, somewhat um, polite, if that's a way to put it. Which is weird, right?
Yes, yes,
There's
yes.
no like fist fights or
True.
anything, which would be out of place for these folks. So I think they played it really well. I mean, it was an incredibly well put together movie. They had some. I guess if I had to say one thing that didn't work was they had some external things with some uh, terrorist stuff happening outside the conclave that threatened to derail some things, but it never really came to fruition. It was kind of tacked on a little bit. I think I would just get rid of most of that. I know they were trying to do some, give you some other thoughts by having that stuff happen, because you never really saw it happening. You only saw it as it affected the conclave mostly, and but I think they could have not even had that, to be honest with you.
Mhm.
It would have been
Yes.
fine without it. There's a whole thing about Benitez was a cardinal in some war torn countries, and so I think they were trying to infuse a little bit of the fact that they're going through a age old process that has nothing to do with the real world, and the real world is violent and people lash out and there's bombings and things. I think that was kind of the juxtaposition, but I don't necessarily think they needed to do it.
For sure. So, how accurately does the movie depict the tradition and rituals of a conclave?
I'm not that familiar with it, but I was assuming, given some of the details that they showed, that it and from some things that I know over time, that it was probably pretty accurate in its portrayal of the process.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
because the interesting. I think found it really interesting. So they have like the catch-all where they put all the ballots, and it's not, you just don't drop your ballot in. There's like a little plate, and you set it on the plate, and everybody says a prayer, and then they tip the plate, and it slides down into the container, and then the priest take each vote individually out of the container and read off who the vote was for, and then there's a person, they pass it, they have somebody check it to double check that it's the right person, because they handwrite all the votes. It's not like they have a ballot, and just to make sure they check the handwriting. And then there's a guy who basically, each vote, once it's counted, they pierce it with a needle, a big needle, onto a threaded thread, and they thread them together so that all of the counted ballots are on the thread and all of the uncounted ballots are loose. And but it's a whole kind of ritualistic thing, which is kind of fascinating in and of
Definitely.
itself. A lot of rituals in the Catholic Church, so makes sense.
Makes sense. So, if you want to rate this movie 1 to 10, where
Oh
you
gosh,
gonna?
so well, 10's a hard one, right, Daniel? I don't know
Yes.
that I don't know that I'm a 10. I don't give out many 10s, I would guess. What have I
Mm.
given so far? I would say this is definitely a solid 8, maybe a 8.5.
8.5, yes.
Yeah, I don't want to go to 10. No, it's not 10.
Do you think this need improvement?
Well, I mean, I've only watched it once. If I watch it a couple more times, I'm sure I'll find more faults.
For sure. So, Mr. Bob, before we go on, please do listen to my other podcast, Book 101 Review, in its fifth season. People, fifth season already, and please do listen to my feature author of the month of January, award-winning and best-selling author, Mr. Hari Turtle Dove. So please do listen, Book 101 Review. And Mr. Bob, would you like to
Oh,
share
well, you can listen to me here.
yes, share to your another podcast?
Or if you want to hear me tell some silly stories, you can come over to Static Radio at staticradio.com on all the socials. And this week I talk about surprising somebody when they least expected it.
Yes, at
I
least
won't go into any more than that, but you can listen to the new show.
no spoilers.
No spoilers,
No.
exactly.
Definitely. Oh, to wrap up our discussion about Conclave, Mr. Bob, what else you can say about it?
It's a great movie. You don't have to be a person who's interested in the Catholic Church to enjoy it. You can just enjoy it for what it is, which is a very good, solid movie with twists and turns and all kinds of interesting stuff.
Yes. Be open minded, people. So, see you next week. Another movie to scrutinize. And Mr. Bob, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Daniel. See you next time.
Morgan, people. See you soon. That's intriguing. I love it.